I'm not sure that we're ever going to get a majority of the American people after over a decade of war, after what happened in Iraq, to say that any military action, particularly in the Middle East, makes sense in the absence of some direct threat or attack against us. And that's understandable. You know, if you talk to my own family members or Michelle's, you know, they're very wary and suspicious of any action.
All right, so there you have it. Michelle and her family and Obama's family, they don't want any action against Syria. Neither do I, but I don't know how that's relevant. Welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. Joining us now to talk about what Barack Obama might say tonight, what he might really mean tonight when he says what he says, because it's hardly ever the same, and what he might do going forward is our friend Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor. Hey, Byron, how are you?
Hi, Steve. It's good to be here.
Well, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. So, where do we go from here? I just saw something breaking on, I think, the Examiner website, if I'm not mistaken, that Putin now says the U.S. must call off the strike before any deal could be reached. So,
yeah, that seems to be the position that's emerging in Russia and in the Security Council, and maybe with France as well. And here's what I think has happened. I think Obama has dodged the problem he made for himself by vowing to go to Congress to seek authorization. It looked like he had really boxed himself in, but now they're putting off this vote because of these diplomatic efforts. So, okay, he's dodged that bullet for a little bit at least. The problem is something that he said on August 31st. When he comes out and announces that he's going to seek congressional authorization, he says, after careful deliberation, I have decided that the United States should take military action against Syrian regime targets. And he can't really, I think, sign on to any sort of deal in which, right at the beginning, he renounces this strategy that he's already said that he believes needs to be pursued, and he decided it after careful deliberation. So he's still in a box, I think.
Do you believe what's going on here? I mean, if we could take a step back, if we were looking at a kangaroo nation or something, or a banana republic, you might say, okay, but this is the United States of America. I don't think we should go near Syria. But you know what the president should have done? He should have threw the missiles in there in the first place, and that would have been the end of it.
Well, you know, there was a lot of talk about that at the very beginning, that it's because other presidents have taken military actions without seeking the authorization of Congress. It's been done in the past. And if the president had come out and said, after this chemical warfare attack in Syria, and said, you know, this is what I've decided to do, and, you know, 3 hours ago, the forces of the United States began attacking military regime targets in Syria.
Right.
You know, some people would have yelled about it. I mean, there's no doubt.
Oh, I would have yelled about it, but at least we wouldn't have looked like what we look like.
But it would have been done, you know. I mean, and you really wouldn't have had a lot of recourse, and it's not like they're going to impeach him over something like that. But then he gets in a situation where he promises to go ask for permission, and then it looks like he's not going to get it, and the question is he going to do it instead, which would be infinitely worse politically for him.
Absolutely. And then...
So, just nuts.
And then we come... Right, it is nuts. And then we come to the place we are now, and you wrote a great piece. I was not aware of Albert Brooks, the comedian, actor, who actually uttered a line on Twitter, I believe, that suggested a scenario, and that scenario has come to fruition partially as to where we are now in cooperation maybe between Russia and the U.S. Talk about that.
This is so crazy. Well, we were headed to this situation a few days ago. We're headed to this showdown in Congress. It looks like Obama's going to lose. You know, the world is kind of looking at him. He's embarrassed. You know, what's going on? You know, it looks terrible. And on Friday night, Albert Brooks, who, I follow him on Twitter, he mostly just does one-liners, okay? He's a comedian.
Right,
Most
yeah.
of his Twitter feed is jokes. So he says, he sends out a tweet, and it says, Russia and the U.S. could unite for 1 week, go into Syria, remove the chemicals, and let them continue fighting. Okay, it's pretty funny. It's a joke.
And that's where we are.
It's exactly what happened. And so it's funny, yesterday as all this was unfolding, Albert Brooks tweeted very dryly. He said, "I believe I tweeted this last Friday."
Well, lucky for us, though, Byron, according to the president, interviewed yesterday, and I played the soundbite earlier, he claims credit, kind of, because, oh, yes, I've talked about this for quite some time now with Vladimir Putin, about this very scenario. And, of course, John Kerry, who was very plainly asked what could be done for Assad to stave off an attack, didn't come up with this and volunteer it. And then after he said, well, he could, give up his weapons, blah, 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 said, but it's impossible. Now he claims that he's been talking about it with his Russian counterpart.
Who knows what happens here? I mean, you're absolutely right. That's what happened. Kerry says it. I mean, he looked jet-lagged to me. I mean, he's an older man. He's flying across a million time zones, and he looked like, to me, just kind of, his tongue got away from him there for a little while.
Well, I think the French get jet-lagged before Americans, so that would explain that.
And the State Department basically treats it as if it had been kind of some sort of jet-lag gaffe.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the Russians see, I think they seized an opportunity. They jump on this, and Capitol Hill jumps on this. And then the president, he does all these interviews with Chris Wallace and the other network anchors, and the president says, "I knew that. I talked about that with Putin, at the G20 a few days ago."
Right. I didn't draw the red line, but I talked about the solution with Putin.
Is this still? We don't know the provenance of all this. We absolutely don't know. I think we'll find out at some point. I mean, it's a lot of people were involved in this, so we'll find out maybe in the next few days. But it appears to be as wacky and as ad hoc and as ad-libbed as it appears.
Well, all right. Well, we're talking to Byron York, chief political correspondent at the Washington Examiner. But let me ask you this. We've heard that he has revamped his speech from what it might have been a couple of days ago. Yep. What the heck does he say tonight?
Well, he has to, because, I don't know what he was going to say before, but, I mean, before this whole diplomacy stuff happened, it appeared to be, his options were backing off or driving the car over the cliff. And, support on Capitol Hill was just drying up. I mean, there were just very, very few members of Democrats or Republicans coming out, to support the president. It looked like some of the whip counts had the people opposed to it in the 230 numbers in the House, which is enough to defeat the president. So, it looked like it was going to be some sort of persuasive effort. Now, I think the president will emphasize that he is cautiously, approaching this diplomatic effort, but he wants to give the world community time. But he maintains, the only reason this is happening
is because
of the credible threat of United States military force, and that threat is there and strong, and the United States must, be ready to attack if necessary. But, Congress, you don't have to vote on it tonight. Don't worry. So I think that's some version of what he's going to say.
Did you hear this cut? I just want to play it for you. He was on with Gwen Ifill. This will be 27, Will. He was on with Gwen Ifill, and this really struck me. And Gwen Ifill said, could Syria hurt us? Could they harm us or our allies? If we attack them? And here's what he said. And I got to ask you your reaction to this. Here's the cut.
His allies do, though. Iran, Hezbollah. They could carry out asymmetrical attacks against our embassies, for example, in the region. But we don't actually think that they want to do something like that. Keep in mind that Iran was the country probably last subjected to large-scale chemical weapons used by Saddam Hussein. So there's a real aversion to chemical weapons inside of Iran. I don't think either Iran or Hezbollah thought that what Assad did was a good idea. For us to take a limited, proportional, although significant strike on Assad's capabilities to degrade them, I don't think would prompt them to get involved.
All right. In other words, he's saying, hey, you know what? Hezbollah and the Ayatollahs in Iran, they're human. They have humanity. They saw what Assad did. They don't think it was that great. And Iran was once victimized themselves. So I don't think they're going to do anything to get back at us. They're not that. They're pretty decent people. I mean, I was floored.
Yeah, it's funny when someone comes to a conclusion that you agree with, in part, which I don't think that the United States has to do something in Syria as a signal to Iran, but he comes at it through such an incredibly naive way of thinking. which is really astonishing. It seems to me that all the talk about Iran, I just don't think Iran would be deterred by whether the president does or does not do something about Assad's use of chemical weapons. It seems to me that Iran would be deterred by what we should be doing now to Iran,
Oh,
which
thank
is
you.
which is sanctions that really cripple, and we are doing a lot of sanctions, although belatedly. Sanctions that really cripple. We should be sabotaging their nuclear program, a la the Stuxnet virus, which was incredibly successful for a while. And, let's face it, sometimes key players in the Iranian program might have an accident or two somewhere.
Like when a motorcycle pulls up to their car and a magnetic bomb is put on it and kapoo.
It just, things like this happen occasionally.
Yeah.
And so that's the way it seems to me. I hope nobody wants to go to war with Iran. I mean, we don't need to go to war with Iran. We need to keep them from getting a nuclear weapon. And if you can do it through those methods, I think that's the way to do it. And that's what we should be doing and are doing now. And it doesn't have anything to do with any signal that might be sent or what we do or do not do in Syria. It's actual Iranian policy.
Right. Now, I think your word naive is the same exact. I've never heard such a naive statement from a president, even in Obama's long list of statements. I mean, to say, basically, I put my faith in Hezbollah and Iran. They won't do anything because they weren't crazy about what Assad did. I can't even fathom that line of thinking.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Oh, my gosh. Anyway, hey, Byron, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Steve. Good
Take
to be
care.
here.
Thank you. Byron York, ladies and gentlemen, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. And again, the latest, and we will talk to Senator John Hoeven about this from North Dakota a little bit later on. Putin now saying that there could only be a deal with regard to Syria's dissolving or disclosing the locations of their chemical weapons.